This podcast is brought to you by Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at San Diego State University. This new medium for learning amplifies our mission of providing intellectually stimulating content. Welcome to Constitutional Context. This is Professor Glenn Smith with 5-minute bites of background about the court and Constitution. Regardless of their political ideology or partisan stripe, modern presidents regularly raise constitutional controversies when they exercise executive authority. President Obama's 2014 DAPA program, which would have postponed deportability for several million undocumented parents of U.S. citizens and permanent residents, was twice declared illegal by lower federal courts. And the Trump presidency has already generated more than its share of controversial executive orders, including the firestorm erupting after late January orders to temporarily close U.S. borders to immigrants and other entrants from 7 predominantly Muslim countries. These recent developments make it especially appropriate for this podcast to provide an Executive Power 101 primer so that listeners will understand what's in the background of the inevitable controversies that will likely unfold. The core principles surrounding the president's power to act are fairly straightforward, although application of these can be especially detailed and difficult. The basic guidelines were stated in the 1952 decision in Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company v. Sawyer, in which 6 justices ruled that President Truman could not, by executive order, seize the nation's steel mills to avert a strike threatening Korean War-era steel production. Justice Hugo Black's Youngstown majority opinion stated that the Constitution affords the president 2 alternative paths to power. First, the president can legitimately claim to act as the agent of Congress. Article 1 of the Constitution provides the Congress with a variety of powers, such as authority to regulate commerce. And since the late 1930s, constitutional doctrines have recognized the necessity of Congress delegating authority to the President or other executive branch officials to ongoingly implement congressional commands. Second, quite apart from gaining power through congressional delegation, Article 2 of the Constitution gives the President his own executive powers. Principal among these are the Commander-in-Chief power and the power to faithfully execute the laws of the United States. The bottom line? Whatever the political or other merits of presidential orders, their legal validity depends upon a showing that the President is either acting as Congress's legitimate representative or acting within his own powers. Of course, this seeming clarity can quickly become fuzzy. For one thing, figuring out whether the laws passed by Congress permit executive discretion or create a mosaic of statutes the President is faithfully executing requires in-depth analysis of the words, legislative history, and purposes of past enactments. These legislative intent indicators are subject to multiple interpretations and spirited argument. A second complication comes from the 2 competing tendencies long used by judges and other officials in assessing claims of presidential power. Sometimes the approach is highly formalistic, emphasizing strict compliance with finely wrought distinctions between executive and legislative power. At other times, a majority has been more pragmatic, recognizing, as Justice Robert Jackson wrote in his Korean War-era Youngstown concurrence, that in the actual art of governing, whether the president's claim of power prevails depends, quote, on the imperatives of events and contemporary imponderables rather than on abstract theories of law, unquote. One ultimate complication is that even if the president and his underlings have the power to do what they are claiming, the individual liberties protections in other parts of the Constitution may constrain them. Thus, had the Youngstown court decided that President Truman had the power to order steel mill seizures, the court would then have had to decide whether Truman's order was nevertheless illegal because it threatened property rights enshrined in our founding document. And even if the Trump administration is deemed to have the power to issue his Muslim country travel ban, it might still violate due process of law or rights against religious discrimination. Such is the constitutional tightrope that any president must walk. If you'd like to further explore this subject, or the court and the Constitution generally, I regularly teach courses at SDSU's Osher Lifelong Learning Institute. See the current course catalog at neverstoplearning.net/OLLI.